What's going on, guys? Welcome back, and today I am going to be bringing you my book review of Thrawn Ascendancy Lesser Evil. Now, this is the final installment in the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy, which is a prequel to the canon Thrawn trilogy, and before I get into it, I do want to clarify that I may have mild spoilers in this video. I'm going to be talking about plot elements of the two prior books and how they connect to this one. However, I won't be going into detail on those plot elements, so hopefully you guys will be able to enjoy this video without feeling like you're getting spoiled too much. Now, I thought this book was great. I think all of the other Thrawn books are good to great, at least the ones that I've read. I have not read the Legends books. I have read all of the canon books, though, and I think they're just all good to great. They're all top-tier Star Wars material, and this one is no exception. It's a great conclusion to the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy as well as the Thrawn series as a whole, and it just does a great job of concluding all of the elements from this trilogy as well as tying it into the other Thrawn series. Now, starting off, I want to talk about our antagonist, Jixtus. At the end of Chaos Rising, Jixtus was introduced, and just at the very end, so you didn't really know a lot about him. In Greater Good, he was in the background kind of pulling the strings, but you didn't really understand the full significance of his character until the end of Greater Good, where it's revealed that he is a Grisk. Now, the Grisks were these villains in the other canon Thrawn trilogy, who were just kind of this one-dimensional, antagonistic force, this oppositionary force to Thrawn, and they felt more like an obstacle for him to overcome. But in this one, they actually do feel more threatening, at least this character does. He's going around planting seeds of doubt within all of the Chiss families, lying to them, manipulating them, and within that there is a theme that I really like of kind of the easy corruptibility of social systems and of political systems, but he's actually more of an imposing character than the Grisks in those other books. He's actually very competent on, a technical level in regards to his tactics and his military capability and might, but also in regards to his political capabilities, and that is typically Thrawn's oversight, as previously stated. So he's just a really, compelling antagonist in that regard. He's actually, imposing and capable and competent, unlike the other Grisks in the other series, which I just kind of got sick of because they kept talking about how imposing and threatening they were, despite the fact that Thrawn beat them at every corner. But in this one, Jixtus is actually a good antagonist. Like, he's actually imposing and threatening, and I enjoyed his character. There's not a lot to him as a character. He doesn't have a lot of depth. He is relatively kind of two-dimensional, but I do think that he was an imposing threat, and I thought he was far better than the Grisks that were introduced in Thrawn Alliances and Thrawn Treason. Now, I also just wanted to talk about how impressive this book is, just on a structural level, and how it continues the story from the previous books. In my opinion, Chaos Rising, the first one, is the most dependent on world building and character establishment. The second one really started to introduce the conflict and the main plot, and in this one you get the culmination of all of that and a continuation of that. But it's also able to continue building out the world, which I think is just really well done. This world is set within a world that we are familiar with, which is the Star Wars galaxy. But Timothy Zahn has just created this entirely new and different world within the world we are familiar with. And I think it's just really well done how he's able to make the story and characters stay true to the way they were before, but is also able to continue building out this world and expanding it from what we were introduced to in those first two books. It's something that goes for all three, but I think it's just really well done. We're still finding out more about the Chiss Ascendancy and the political systems within it and the families and all of that. We're still learning more about it even at this, final climactic chapter of the story, and I think that was really well done. I also like how at the beginning of this book, we are at a different point than where we were at the beginning of the other two books, because in the second book, you were learning about the plot that the villain was concocting, but you didn't really understand it until the end, and all of the pieces and different plot elements kind of connected, and you understood the big picture at the end of the second book. But you realize at the beginning of this book that the characters within the story have still not figured out the mystery. They were able to stop the conflict at the end of the previous book, but they're still unawares as to who the true villain is and who their actual main antagonist is. And I think that was just really interesting because at the beginning of this book, you are mostly aware of what's going on behind the scenes, but the characters within the story aren't. So it's just very engaging and tension-filled. This book is really good at building tension. A lot of this book is build-up, and I think it was just all really well done in that regard. Just the structure and the continuation of the story, all of that is just really well done in this book. And then as well as all of the world building and such, you also just get a really good expansion and look into Thrawn's character as well. You know, in all three of these books, you have the memory chapters, which are these flashback chapters, and in the previous ones, I thought they were balanced really well in the story. They gave context to the story you were seeing play out currently, while also kind of showing you the introduction of particular characters and how they apply to the current story being told. But in this one, at first, they felt the most intrusive to me, because at first it seemed like they weren't really connecting to the overarching story. The flashbacks in this book consist of Thrawn and his friend Thras, who was briefly mentioned in the previous two books, and they talked about how he had died, but you didn't understand how, and you didn't really know how deep the relationship went between Thrawn and Thras. And in this one, you get a really good exploration of those two characters, and as well as how Thras views Thrawn, and you get an insight into Thrawn that you didn't really get before, which is just this person who's actually able to understand him and has formed a relationship with him on, like, a human level. And it's just a really kind of emotional story, honestly. Like, in my opinion, this is the most emotionally resonant Thrawn book in regards to the characters and their relationships to one another. It all culminates here, and through that character Thras, you're able to explore elements of Thrawn's history as well as the Force. This book deals with elements of the Force that we're unfamiliar with. It explores the Force in a different way than any other Star Wars property, and you get the most exploration of that in this book of this trilogy. And you just kind of deepen Thrawn's backstory. This character Thras is able to uncover secrets from the past, and those secrets are able to help people in the present, and I really like that a lot. I like that this character who died is still able to affect change even after his death, and I find that really powerful, and I just thought it was all really well done in that regard of, you know, deepening Thrawn's character. And yet again, Timothy Zahn was able to prove me wrong. At the beginning of the book, I thought maybe these flashbacks aren't so great. I was kind of meh on them, but then by the end, I was like, okay, I see what you were going for. That was actually great. This is amazing. And it's not only Thrawn that gets deepened. This book brings every single character that has been established, even characters that were only briefly alluded to or had briefly appeared in previous books. They all come to their logical conclusions in this book, and it really does feel high stakes for the world of the Chiss Ascendancy. You know the Chiss Ascendancy can't fall at this point in time, but all of the characters are kind of brought to these extremes. They all kind of go to these extreme lengths throughout the book, even characters that you like, and they do things and go to lengths that we as the reader may regard to be morally incorrect, but you understand why they do the things they do. All the characters came to their logical conclusions, and I personally just felt like all of it was really well executed. All the characters were balanced well, and there's so many of them to count and so many to mention that I can't mention all of them, but all of them were well done. Characters that you wanted to see redeemed were redeemed. Characters that you wanted to see the conclusions of their arcs executed well were executed well. I can't really think of any weak link in that regard. Everything was executed well, and there's just this really great scene with this really great quote that I found very powerful. You know, Thrawn has great quotes throughout all these books, but this quote did not come from Thrawn's character. There's a scene towards the end of the book where, you know, one of these ships with characters that we care about is going into the final battle, and this one character says that seen as his family is one of the lesser Chiss families, and all these other characters who are like the captains of these ships and the admirals are of more renowned Chiss families, that all these other people are going to get the credit and they will be remembered, and that after this battle, if they all die, they will be remembered and he will not. And it's, you know, it's a rightful concern on his part, and you understand that. And then this character says this really great quote to him. The captain says to him, "History isn't ours to write. None of us know how we'll be remembered by scholars 100 years from now, but be assured that those who know you, who have worked with you, and who respect you will hold your memory close." That is so incredibly powerful. And I really like that this book touches on that. A lot of forms of media don't touch on that. The fact that a lot of kind of great historical figures throughout history perhaps have a lot of unsung heroes who are attached to them. You know, the people that we do remember perhaps had those who helped them along their journeys who are the real unsung heroes. But I like that by the end of the day, those people perhaps can rest easy because they know that those around them remembered them. And I find that quote really powerful. I think it explores an element that a lot of forms of media don't bother to explore. And I thought it was just a great culmination of just a lot of the themes that this story explores. And just going into the end of this book, everyone's story culminates, as I stated before, in this epic finale, this epic battle. And I can't imagine any other better way to conclude this epic 6-book story. Every character, every group that we've come to know throughout these books just comes into this epic battle at the end, and it's really well balanced. There are so many characters in it that it cuts back to throughout these chapters dedicated to this battle, and it never felt cluttered or confused. It was handled with clarity. I understood what was happening. It was just an extremely well-executed battle. It was well-balanced. The heroes had losses and victories. The villains had losses and victories. It was just a really well-executed battle in every regard, and it was just super exciting and satisfying for me as a fan who has followed all of these books over the last year, and it was just extremely well done. It's definitely the best battle of all of these books. I couldn't imagine it being executed any better, and I can't think of anyone else who could have executed it better than Timothy Zahn. And as stated previously, this book just brought Thrawn's story to an excellent conclusion for the time being. Not only does it tie really well into the other Thrawn trilogy, but it also concludes the story that has been told over these 6 books really well. There are personal stakes involved for all the characters, especially Thrawn, and it kind of ends on a somber note. It's not the victorious conclusion that you'd expect from a series like this. It ends on a somber note because Thrawn is ultimately not recognized for his heroic actions. He's instead reprimanded for them, and it's a very kind of upsetting moment to see, but it makes sense and it ties really well into the other series. And Thrawn explains by the end that the reason they were able to win was not because they're the heroes, but because they were the lesser evil, which ties into the title. You know, he is recognizing the fact that the people that he's sworn to protect, the people that he cares so much about, are not perfect, and that they are easily corruptible, but they were in fact the lesser evil in this story, as opposed to Jixtus and his Grisk soldiers. And I really liked that, and I also liked that they addressed the fact that Thrawn is willing to go to any lengths to defend his people. You know, that's what the Imperial storyline is about. A lot of people take Thrawn's actions out of context in Rebels and in the other Thrawn books as being evil, where they were simply just showing loyalty to his people. And I feel like that's very important to nail that balance, and that's why I'm concerned about the way Thrawn's character will be handled in the future, now that he's in the hands of Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, the people helming these Star Wars shows, especially Ahsoka. Because I'm afraid that they will turn Thrawn's character, a character with so many dimensions and so much depth to him, and they will turn him into this one-dimensional villain. But at the same time, I won't really be that upset about that because I still have this story, this epic 6-book story exploring this character in great depth. And this book ends off in a way that it draws all the characters' stories to a conclusion, but also leaves it open-ended enough for them to be explored in the future. From what I've heard, this may be Timothy Zahn's final book, and I think that's fine. You know, I'm happy, or I would be happy to see in the future other writers perhaps pick up what he left here and, you know, continue the stories of these characters. But if that doesn't happen, I'm happy with the way this concluded. And even if Thrawn's character is not handled with care in the future, I am happy with the way the story concludes with this book. Now, before I end it off, I do want to say, if I were to say anything negative about this book, it's that I feel like on a large scale, there was a kind of a lack of stakes for the characters. They set up a lot of characters to have some kind of sacrifice play in the finale, and what I found weird was that none of that really gets paid off. None of the characters really die that I thought were going to die. I'm not saying I wanted these characters to die, but I felt like it was logically set up for them to do so. So I just found it weird that none of the characters died. I felt like that was something that was necessary in order to solidify this as being a high-stakes finale. There are high stakes for the Ascendancy, but we know the Ascendancy can't fall, at least at this point in time. So I felt like at least one of these characters that they set up to die, dying, would have solidified this book's position in the overarching story. But I felt like there was on a large scale, lack of stakes, because none of the main protagonists that we follow throughout these books, even kind of the lesser characters, the one that had that quote said to him that I talked about earlier, none of them die. And I found that weird, because there were like at least 3 or 4 characters that I can think of that were set up to die, and they didn't. And I felt like that was important, and I felt like it was missing. I felt like that was something that it was missing. Once again, on a character level, there are still stakes involved. Thrawn's character, he has some crazy weight put on him at the end of this book. There are consequences involved for his character and for all the characters by the end of the story. But I felt like on a large scale, there were some stakes just that weren't there, and I felt like they were needed in order to solidify this book's position. But overall, this book was fantastic. It was constantly engaging. It's a great conclusion to the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy, as well as the Thrawn series as a whole, and it was just great. I would recommend all of these books. I think they are all top-tier Star Wars material, and I think Thrawn's character is fantastic. He's one of my favorite Star Wars characters, and I feel like people really do need to read all 6 of these books to really understand the true depth of his character, and that he's not just this one-dimensional villain that he was portrayed as in Rebels. Once you read these books, you will understand truly the depth behind the actions that he takes in that show, and I hope against hope that his character will be treated with respect in the future. But with all that said, that's about all I have to say about Thrawn Ascendancy Lesser Evil. You guys please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Are you going to read Thrawn Ascendancy Lesser Evil? Have you read it? Just whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.